Welcome to the Sound and the Healing podcast. We're your hosts, Claire Bigley and Rohini Kaniganti. Maybe we're all searching among the branches for what only appears in the roots. This is what we'll be exploring. Please join us.
Welcome to the Sound and the Healing. You're joining us for episode 3. I have my lovely co-host, Rohini Kaniganti, here with me. And happy February, Ro.
Oh my goodness, happy February. It's just rolling out already. It's all unfolding.
That's for sure. We have an exciting episode planned for today, although I'm sure there will be twists in the road, as there always are between the two of us. But our intention this episode is to dive into our title a little bit. Our podcast is The Sound and the Healing, and we want to dissect a little bit what is sound. And specifically, what is sound? I think this episode we're going to dive into in music. What is sound in music? How does it affect you? What are perhaps composers' intentions when they create music? Just who knows where we'll go in this, but I'm excited about the dive.
Absolutely. And, I think it would be important too, Claire, to speak about sound in general. Why did we evolve with sound being such a primary sense? Is that all right if we do that?
Absolutely. That's a great place to start, I think. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, you're the classically educated pianist and composer, performer. How did sound get introduced to you in your education?
Well, it's interesting. I may take the long way towards answering this, so forgive me if I go in loops a little bit. But I would say our lives are infused with sound and music and sound. And I think we all, majority of us, use it without even realizing it. Now it's been used through the ages, chanting, religious music, toning, humming. I think it's been around from the get-go, right? One of the first things. It's a way we can all meet each other and hum the same tone, hum the same syllable, or hum different syllables, and it's still, you're being heard without it being cacophony. So it's a medium in which many things can be held at the same time. So I think fast forward through the ages, through the years, slaves, in horrific things that they were asked to do, made to do, and yet they would sing, right? They would communicate with each other and sing, calm their bodies, balance their bodies. We do it today. If I want to clean the house, I'm putting on some cleaning music. If I want a good cry, I've got soundtracks to evoke sadness in me, to evoke grief in me. I can hear a song on the radio and it can take me back to college because I remember it was a soundtrack that I listened to at a particular time in my life. So we all use it without being aware, I think, of what we're doing. It's so ingrained, it's so authentic, and it's so natural to us. Did that answer your question at all?
Oh, I absolutely. And did you use music to study and learn? And if so, what did you use? And what did you notice going on inside you? I mean, you're a very attuned ear, right? Or you wouldn't have been studying music. What happened inside of you and what did you use?
Well, it's interesting, and it might be surprising to the listeners. As you said, I'm classically trained. So when I was practicing piano, which was my main instrument, I also played the French horn, but piano was my main instrument. Depending on where I was in my process, when I first started, things were easy. So I was, just playing, sitting down and playing. As I started to have to practice, in college, I was up to maybe practicing 4 to 8 hours a day. So at that time, the stuff I was practicing was classical music, classical piano music, Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin. When I was not working on my skills and learning my craft, I listened to pop and rock music. So, when I was in high school, I was into Rush, which for many percussionists, is it, God, I'm going to screw this up. They're going to hate me, but Geddy Lee, I believe, was the vocalist, and I think Neil Peart was the drummer. Very gifted drummer. And so you talk to any percussionist in an orchestra or any, professional drummer, they know Rush. And so I was always attracted to intricate rhythms, how polyrhythms, how different rhythms would fit together. Lyrics, I liked smart lyrics. And when I would study, pop and rock wouldn't necessarily distract me, so I could read, I could study while I was listening to music.
Most people listen to Bach when they're studying, say, something really challenging and difficult. It seems to create a harmonic in the brain, a sense of landing that helps people focus, right? It's in so many studies have shown that classical music can really support learning and memory.
Well, it depends. Mozart is very symmetrical and balanced, so it focuses the mind. It, for the most part, you have equal and balanced measures, that kind of thing. So it's going to focus, absolutely. Bach can do the same thing, but if you've ever worked on Bach, it's very intricate and very challenging, and there's more chromaticism in Bach, in some parts of Bach, than like in Mozart or the classical musicians. So for me, I find Bach to be busy. So if I was studying something, I wouldn't want to listen to Bach because I wouldn't be able to study. It would, overstimulate me. But, I think music hits people in different ways. We're not all the same. So,
you were a music nerd, so you knew what to listen to. It didn't, for me, when I listen to Bach, I respond by just dropping in so deeply. And I just wanted to say, I mean, we can talk about the origin of sound in human beings, right, in evolutionarily, and in animals, and who's got a better sound hearing system and why, and how important sound is for a sense of survival, for this huge difference between, you mentioned chanting at the beginning, a chanting sound versus a shrill, shrieky sound. Or, as you were helping me prep for this call, you also said, hey, Rohini, you sound really hot. It's not sexy, but the kind of the sound.
Oh, you're always sexy, Ro. Come on.
But you were saying that I was just starting at a higher pitch, right? Than
Not necessarily a higher pitch. It was like when you listen to sometimes vocalists on a mic, they're p or they're t or they're b.
uh-huh.
It implodes on a mic or something. And so if you're starting a sentence with a lot of air all at once, it's going to be a higher volume. And then as you finish the sentence, it evens out. Yeah.
Well, and the reason that you were talking with me about that is because while one of our sort of underlying intentions for this is to be deeply soothing and calming, that even as we discuss what we discuss, we want you to relax. We want you to feel deeply peaceful. But here I am, if even the beginning sound is off and going, right, you'll feel startled. And Claire didn't want that. And here's this really important thing to know, that startling sounds can be startling and can activate the sympathetic nervous system, the adrenaline going, and in which case it's a cue to the body that we're in danger. We want to get up and run away. Whereas chanting, or you mentioned the song of oppressed communities and how it came together, and you mentioned that they felt a sense of balance while doing this. And what's fascinating, of course, is for me, having studied the organ of the ear and the internal organs, that the human ear also contains a vestibular apparatus, which is responsible for our sense of balance. How fascinating, right?
It really, truly is amazing. As you were just speaking, it alerted something in my brain where I think we as humans, if we're in tune to our bodies and if we're allowing whatever is presenting in the moment, you'll find, some people really frown on heavy metal music, or, the real, discordant type stuff. And I would counter that there are some people who need to get out heavy emotions. They need to get maybe anger out, or they need to wake up their body or something. And so it really depends where you are in your process, where you are as a human, of what music may speak to you, or what sounds, what the body feels is nerve-wracking or calming. It'll vary where you are. Yeah.
Completely. If you look at it from an Ayurvedic perspective and look at it elementally, right, that when we feel very overly earthy, overly fluid, and feel even lethargic, activating music is really, and activating sounds and activating music might be really important. And we might have, in fact, those of us with good solid earth bodies, as you have, might be able to tolerate more activating music, whereas somebody who's, a little skinny binny like I am, I don't have a lot of tolerance for loud sounds and for jarring sounds. They can make me crazy. So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I know we're about to get into some stuff, but this is so important. So there's two hemispheres of the brain. What's been your education around bilateral stimulation versus binaural stimulation? And what's your understanding of the therapeutic benefit of that? And have you worked with that?
Well, let me say that I'm coming at this as a musician who has not studied the clinical, ramifications of this. So I can share what my experience is of this.
No, this is precisely why it's so amazing, because you're a pure seed, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so again, we'll take the long way around if that's okay. But I would say that as a pianist, I instinctively feel as though the left and the right hemispheres of my brain have good connection and are very well balanced. I'm able to do things with both sides of my body pretty easily. I'm not more oriented to left or right. And it's also, both sides of my brain are working when I'm playing, when I'm practicing. And so they're stimulated, they're worked. I'm having to analyze when I'm learning a piece, but I'm also bringing in a state of being and almost meditation as I'm performing. So I would say any musician is working on all cylinders in that regard. Now, in terms of the binaural, say again what you were the two different.
Oh, the binaural
Mm-hmm.
is different. So if you go into YouTube, you'll find a lot of binaural beats versus bilateral, and then within bilateral, biolateral. And we'll talk about this in a different episode, but because we're speaking about healing, these have been used to decrease anxiety and trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, by sound alternating, actually.
Yeah.
Most of
Yeah.
the time when we're listening, it's all going in both ears at the same time. What
Yeah.
bilateral music is going is it's doing is it's alternating
Yeah. So
between.
you can pan it. You can pan it with the stereo of where it's coming in which ear, especially if you've got headphones on. It's very effective. And yeah, I could see the ramifications and the possibilities in that. Absolutely.
It's used in something called brain spotting, and we should speak about brain spotting in a future episode and really, have people experience that. Um, the binaural beats are really interesting, and I just want to say, because I mentioned it, that they're going, it's you're hearing music that's coming in at two different frequencies. And then the theory is that the brain ends up then hearing the difference between the two. So for instance, if you're listening, maybe, right, and that difference causes you to drop in, I'm not sure, but just wanted to mention that's interesting as well when bringing in sound into healing.
Well, we're diving into a little bit of a persnickety reaction I have to the frequency music at the moment. Okay, and for you listeners out there who didn't see my visual, I did the air quotes for frequency music. Because guys, they've got these fancy names, 528 hertz, and this frequency, and it's supposed to. Music has multiple frequencies that are happening at the same time, which is why it is such an all-encompassing, immediate immersifying of your soul into sound. The lower sounds are lower frequencies. There may be 50 hertz or something. The higher sounds, when you're listening to really high sounds, they're 220 hertz or 300 hertz, or, you can, maybe some of the flute tones are up. So, it's this newfangled way of trying to get people to get onto the latest thing. Well, you've been immersed in the latest thing the whole time you've been listening to music. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
Well, this is what's really fun about doing this with somebody who actually knows sound and knows music. So let's keep having.
Oh, and the other thing that I find amazing is, yes, you can isolate a hertz or frequency, with a tuning fork or some things, which we'll get into episodes with tuning forks and the other non-music stuff later. But in music, when you're dealing with acoustic instruments, there's a whole overtone system. So if you're playing one note, you're not actually hearing one note. You're hearing a series of overtones on that one note. So again, talk about inclusivity. Sound is naturally inclusive. You have that fundamental tone, and then the octave above it, then the fifth above that, then the octave above that, and then it is the overtones or the higher series, you get into seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths. So again, you are experiencing all of that frequency at the same time.
It's like bathing yourself with sound.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well, how should we bring this into people listening to a piece of music that you have composed and played? And can we play with that this time?
Absolutely. I was thinking, actually, the track of music, which is my latest composition that I released at the end of December, is called Resolution. And I thought I might play it for us, and then perhaps we can unpack it, dive into that one piece of music. So those were my thoughts. How does that sound, Ro?
That sounds fabulous.
Perfect.
And it's also possible that since you and I are spontaneous and invent and on the spot, that we could listen to that piece of music, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Resolution. And you could give people a little bit of homework on what to listen for. And we could come back in our next podcast, talk about, go into more detail about what might have been received, what was offered, what was received, and how it's landing in the body, how these effects can be integrated. I know I'm always more ambitious. I just,
Well, when we talk about homework, my inner rebel gets all in a panty bunch. That's all.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
But yeah, totally. We can certainly unpack the track, and the listeners can experience it on their own terms if they want to take down some notes of where they felt it in their body, how it may or may not have affected them. They can give us some feedback, some comments, some questions, and we can, definitely in the next episode, attend to that before we, go on to the next subject matter. Absolutely. I'd love for this to be a community discussion. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to play my piece Resolution. Hopefully, the sound and volume on this will be good for our listeners. We are a work in progress, so we will get better of this kind of thing if it isn't. So please be patient with me. All right, here we go. So that was Resolution. Again, it was a composition. It's interesting. I recorded that in a day. I sit down. It's interesting. Many of our listeners, or some of our listeners, may be familiar with a sound healer by the name of Jonathan Goldman. He lives in Denver, Colorado, actually. It may be Denver or Boulder. But anyway, he's been in the field for a long time, and he says that sound plus intention equals healing. And so when I sat down to record this, and most of my recordings I do the same thing, prior to sitting down to record, I put myself into a meditative state. I put myself into, you want to call it the flow, the field, whatever it is. My intention is to create with a healing energy, with a loving energy. And for me, I ask to be able to hear what comes through me from source. So that's how I preface each recording session. Now, once that happens, and I sit in front of the keyboard and allow myself to play, I don't know what's going to come through. I get out of my way and I let what's coming through happen. So I don't always know how something's going to sound until I'm done with the session. And I would say any musician who is creating with the intention of healing or a clear intention, their material is going to sound and hit you differently than a musician who's just recording to have the right notes, or to, who it differs on the intention. So I'll preface it with that. I'm curious, Ro, as to what your experiencing was in listening to it, and we will unpack this further.
That was stunning, Claire. I felt at various times just expanding, just something like stretching in my heart, and closer to the end, it felt like something was raining nectar into my body, or something, something really soft and sweet, that all of it was just coming into my body and landing deeply. And people might have, I have a very active imagination. I'm very visual, and I can feel things in my body. I'm also very kinesthetic. So the combination of that means that I'll visualize what is happening inside my body. And it may not be that for those of you who are listening. So please, just whatever comes through, it could be words, The other thing that I really want to share, Claire, is that the last podcast, we had people not record, but we recorded ourselves responding with sound. And that is a composition on its own. And that, it just felt so beautiful that you can move into sounding yourself. And note to self, by the way, last time you said something like, your signature sound. I want to come to that.
Well, I would offer that, because I think we can do an episode of what is sound with sounding and non-music. So I think there's a whole thing we can unpack with that.
We can, but even just that sounding with intention, I am going to sound for the intention of knowing myself better. So simple, right? It doesn't have to be anything as lofty as I'm trying to heal, the pain in my ankle, or, my heart disease. It can be, I'm just But that sound plus intention is healing, because this man didn't say music plus intention is healing. He said sound. So I think that needed to be interjected, and I'm so happy that you said that.
I love hearing your experience of resolution, Rohini. It's so helpful and so interesting for me to hear how each listener experiences it. As you said, everyone's going to experience it a little different, and I think that's the joy of music. There are many different elements, there are many different layers to this, and so I will talk a little bit on this track as a listener myself now, taking my composer hat off and putting my listener hat on. I hear in the beginning of this, and much of my music, it starts as an introduction. I don't typically start off my pieces loud. I want to invite the listener in. I want to quiet their nervous system from the get-go so that there's a bit of groundedness. So there's softness, there's some slow rhythm as I start this piece. And then once that kind of groundedness and calm anchor kind of stabilizes, you'll notice I bring in some different rhythms. I bring in some different textures. There's some staccato later on in the piece, because what I'm wanting to do is tease out different invitations to different emotions in a listener. And with the resolution, just the title, and again, I didn't go into this piece with the intention of it being called Resolution. It told me what its name was after I recorded it. And so we start at a starting place in this piece, and then there are questions that are being asked. There's a high motive. And again, you'll notice I'm bringing in low tones, I'm bringing in high tones, because I want to cradle and balance and meld all the different frequencies. I want to interact with your mind and your air. I want to interact with the ground and the anchoring and some percussion to move. And so for me, it's a space where different motives, differing dialogues can be heard both equally. So for me, it's really an idiom where you can experience the all at the same time. It can all live together. So that's what I love about all of this. And you'll notice that bum, 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 that high interval that I tended to pepper throughout the whole track. As a listener, that hits me on a couple different levels. Number one, you want some unifying motives, you want some unifying themes, so that the listener, as they are transported, as they are shifted and opened, they have some sort of stability, right? That they can, a through line, so they're not out left in the cold. It also, for me, invokes a bird call. So if you listen to it again with that interval and that high thing, it's a bird call. And studies have been shown that bird song instantly calms the nervous system in people, because, back in the day, if there weren't birds around, there was probably predators. There was probably something going on. But when you hear that soothing bird call, we instinctively knew at a primal level that we were safe. So there's so many different angles and elements to this that I'm aware of as I listen to. And I didn't necessarily plan to include them as I was recording. I was just an open space, and so this came through me.
Oh, so fabulous, Claire, to hear your description of this. Makes me so happy to receive this. Some of the things that I was noting, to bring back up is inclusion, which is so important, balance, the through line, the sound and the music, the song holding you so that you're not left out in the cold with one emotion or one memory. It's inviting to the whole self. Now, different pieces of music are going to invite differently, something to stand up and speak. But everything is present, it's very whole. And that was the treatise that you provided when I asked you questions at the beginning of this podcast. The wholeness of music.
Well, and that's just it, Ro. And it continues too, is it it provides an example and an introduction, again, an invitation to move through an emotion, to move through a feeling, because there are many different flavors during this song. I mean, there's sadness, there's melancholy, there's grief, there's acceptance, there's comfort, there's beauty, there's discord, all of that within this piece, but it keeps moving. So it's in training in a really visceral, easy way. It's showing the body how to move through emotions, how to move through states, So again, you have artists who are evoking this, whether consciously or unconsciously, and they're allowing their listeners to experience and transmute and just go through the gamut of emotions in a very healthy, community-oriented way.
Yeah, and even in, you invoked that you were listening to Rush and to other forms of rock, the percussion, the high frequency sounds of an electric guitar. And while they might feel sped up, there's still a whole composition, and that there's no reason that any of us need to move through and resolve. The process is good enough, and that we get to take our time and linger doing that. And that's what causes us to want to listen to a piece of music over and over again. It takes us a little distance, and then we come back. It's going to take us a little further and further in. And this experience that I had at the end, that this was just this soft rain of all of it coming down and just landing inside me, deep inside me. This is something that we might call in the therapeutic circles integration. That when everything comes together, that it's landing together. It's a communion of all the pieces of self, all the feelings.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's funny when you mentioned that loop, because I don't know about you, but I went through periods in my life, and I still do this, when a certain piece of music will just call to me and land for me in a way that I need to continue playing it over and over and over and over again. And I don't always know if it's an emotion I need to integrate, or a feeling, or if it's affecting the body in a certain way. I'm not always conscious of the whys, but I just know I can't stop playing this particular piece of music. And I think we all do that in our own ways, you know? So it's amazing to sometimes unpack the instincts we just naturally can have as humans. It's amazing.
Totally. Yeah. And even if we came back to just sounding out. So sorry, I was squeaking in my chair here unintentionally. Sorry if that was a hot sound. But even if there's an intention of simply sounding for those of us who are not musicians, and as you were speaking, I remembered this scene from The Little Mermaid, which was a Disney film from such a long time ago. I'm just gonna, sorry if I butcher this, but there's this note that she sings, there's this little phrase that she sings. Ah, ah. And I remember just listening to that over and over again. And I can't tell you why I needed to listen to that over and over again, but it felt like something was rising inside of me, something hidden and deep. And for some reason, as I speak it, I have tears in my eyes. And this is the power of music and of sound.
Yes. That is exactly it, Ro. And I don't know a better way to end this particular episode with that nugget of gold.
We so want to hear what your experiences were listening to Claire's music. We will do more of this because she is an extraordinary composer with intention, with a very healing intention. So we're going to come back to this, and we'd love your comments. You can send them through text at our website. If you'd say more about that, Claire, and then we'll look at all of it, and then we'll come back to it.
Well, and I wanted to say too, shout out to a dear friend of mine who is the impotence for us dissecting the title of the podcast. She said, I want to hear more about what is sound. I want to hear more about what is healing. So I'd love for you guys to dive deeper into that. So thank you for inviting us to get more into what is sound.
Yeah.
And yes, we welcome you.
This is co-healing, right? We're going to go back and forth. I mean, our discovery is hinging on your discoveries.
We are in collaboration. Yeah. So thank you. Continue to reach out to us. Feedback. Our website's great. We also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. So we look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, thanks for listening. Thanks so very much for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoyed yourself and will share the sound and the healing with your friends. Please go to our website with any questions or comments you may have, as we plan on using your questions in upcoming episodes. Our website and socials are included at the bottom of our episode descriptions, so please join us to continue the discussion. Until next time, keep on sounding and healing.